Welcome to the Lavish Leader, Unveiling Wisdom, a podcast by the Lavish Group. We are a community of powerful leaders and creators. Each one of us is on a different path and from a different background, but we all embody aspects of what it means to truly live a lavish life. And we are here to share our stories. I'm your host, Dr. Erin Martin. So welcome everybody to Lavish Conversations. I am your host, Dr. Erin Martin, and today we have an absolutely amazing guest. I am so excited to introduce her to you. I am so blessed, honored, and just inspired by this guest, and it is Ms. Marci Shimoff. Welcome, Marci.
Thank you so much. Great to be here with you, Erin.
I'm just going to tell everyone about how wonderful you are. For those of you who may be new to who Marci is a 9-time New York Times bestselling author, a world-renowned transformational teacher, and an expert on happiness, success, and unconditional love. Her books include the international bestsellers Happy for No Reason and Love for No Reason. She is also the women's face of the biggest self-help book phenomenon in history, as co-author of 6 books in the Chicken Soup for the Women's Soul series. With total book sales of more than 16 million copies worldwide in 33 languages, she is one of the best-selling female nonfiction authors of all time. She's also a featured teacher in the international film and book sensation The Secret, and the host of the PBS TV show Happy for No Reason. She also narrated an award-winning movie called Happy. If you haven't seen that, it's a documentary. It's beautiful. Her program, Your Year of Miracles, has been heard by more than 500,000 people. She holds an MBA from UCLA. And through her books and her presentations, her messages have touched the hearts and rekindled the spirits of millions of people throughout the world. Welcome, Marci.
Thank you, Erin.
That is quite the resume. What an honor. And wow, you have been up to some amazing things. I would love to start with, you could share your story and what put you on the path of seeking deeper truths in life and ultimately to where you are now as a transformational leader.
Well, there's that story, we teach what we most want to learn, that saying, we teach what we most want to learn. So I was born depressed. I came out of the womb with existential angst. I just was not a happy camper as a kid. I had great parents and a great family, great circumstances, but it was like I had a dark cloud around. I actually believe now that I was carrying maybe some ancestral trauma or something. And I was really depressed as a kid. And my solution when I was young was sugar. So as a young kid, I became a sugar addict because it was the only time I felt good. But of course, it was only temporary. And by the time I was in high school, I was about 35 pounds overweight. And so when I was in my early 20s, I decided I want to be happy like everybody. That's all people want, is to be happy. So I set goals for myself, and I set 5 goals, and I'm just going to share them with you because I think that most people can relate to at least some of these. I wanted to have a successful career helping people. I wanted to have a wonderful husband or life partner, fabulous friends, a comfortable home, and the equivalent of Halle Berry's body. So I worked really hard to get those, and I got 4 out of the 5. I do not have Halle Berry's body, but I have a healthy body for which I'm very grateful. And I thought, oh, this is so great. It's what's going to bring me that fulfillment. So I had a turning point moment after having worked really hard to get all those ducks in a row. It was in 1998. I had 3 books in the top 5 on the New York Times bestseller list at the same time. And I had just finished giving a speech to 8,000 women. And I had autographed 5,432 books. My client had hired a massage therapist to keep massaging my hands so I could keep on signing. And on one hand, I felt like an author rock star. But I remember going up to my hotel room after autographing that last book, and the client had gotten me the penthouse suite. It was in Chicago. And I walked over to these huge windows overlooking Lake Michigan, and I took in this view. And then I turned around and I collapsed onto the bed and I burst into tears. And I burst into tears because I realized that I had everything I thought I needed. I'd worked really hard to get, and I still had that emptiness inside. I still had that feeling that I'd had as a kid inside, that life wasn't enough. I wasn't safe, whatever all those things are that were churning inside of me that I was trying to fill up from the outside. It didn't work. And that's when I went, okay, I can't fool myself into thinking that just the next thing is going to make me happy. And I dove headfirst into figuring out what's really the secret to happiness. And I interviewed a ton of experts and people who are really experiencing what I call unconditional happiness, no matter what, happy for no reason. And I started doing what they said, and it started working. I went from what I would say is a D plus in happiness to an A. It's not that I'm still a work in progress. I work on this all the time, but it's solid. That hole in my heart is not there like it was in any way. And I think that's our society teaches us that we're going to get it from the outside. And it's great to have accomplishments and things. That's not what's going to fill that hole in the heart.
Yes. I just love that story. And I'm thinking about hundreds of thousands, if not millions of women in the world who are not unsimilar to what you're describing, which is you got the 5 things, you checked all the boxes, and still there's a void. And for some women, that feels like, I'm a doctor. I was an emergency room physician. And when I reached that point that you're describing in my own life, to me, it felt like what I call a sucking chest wound, which is these huge injuries that happen like from a shotgun blast or something to the chest, where it's literally sucking the air out of your lungs. And it felt like I couldn't breathe. It was more than a void. It was more like a vacuum that I was being consumed by. And I know that there's so many women out there who seem like they have it all on the outside, and yet they're feeling completely unfulfilled. And so when you figured out this happiness formula, and with the other work that you've done, and maybe that transformation that happened for you as you were figuring this out, what did you see that wasn't being said for women that needed to be said or expressed?
Well, first of all, that we need to not be blaming ourselves for finding ourselves in this bind. This is something that we almost everybody grew up with societally, where we weren't taught to how we really find that deeper fulfillment inside. And so almost everybody is trying to get everything to work out so that they'll feel okay. And I think you don't have to have everything worked out to kind of get on to the fact that, you know what, I accomplished something. It's great. I'm happy for a day or a week or a month, but then we move the goalpost. It keeps moving. And there's a reason. The reason is that we all have a happiness set point, and it's like a thermostat setting. And no matter what happens to it, whether it's bad or good, we're going to come back to our set point unless we do something to change that. And what doesn't change the set point is our circumstances. That's only about 10% of our set point. 50% of our set point is our DNA. And then the other 40% is our habits of thoughts and behavior, our habits. And that's where we really can shift our set point in a way that's lasting. And I'll even say this, you know, scientists in the field, as you will know, a field of epigenetics, like Dr. Bruce Lipton, who wrote The Biology of Belief, they say that the 50% that's genetic can be influenced or changed by our habits.
Absolutely.
So that means 90% of our true happiness, our deep fulfillment, is going to come from certain specific habits. It's not going to come from our circumstances. That's only 10%. From a very young age, we're not trained in that. So the first thing I'd say for women is don't blame yourself for feeling the way you feel. It's normal that you would feel that way given the training you've had. And so the first step is just a little self-compassion. And then the second step is, to me, it was kind of hallelujah. I don't have to work that hard to make my circumstances look great. I think it's going to be a whole lot easier to work on shifting these habits that will free me. That's really what happened. I mean, they're not hard necessarily, but it's really the inner work that is going to bring us the great fulfillment. And I believe, and I love outer success and all of that. That's fabulous. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. And one of my earlier teachers used to talk about having 200% of life, 100% of the inner life working. And then from that, you naturally flows out the 100% of the outer life. So that's what we're meant for here on the planet.
Oh, I love that. I've got goosebumps on several of the things that you're saying right there. And I hope that I can remember. I wanted to go back and remember what I hear you saying when you're talking about that inner knowing and that part that we can change. So we're talking about our habits. We're talking about our epigenetics. That's 90%. It's not just that we can change it, but for those of us who are a little bit control freaks, 90% of our happiness is under our control. It can be up to us. And the other part that I love about that is 99.9% of people have experienced some sort of trauma, some sort of really, really difficult emotional experience in their life. And you've talked about trauma or ancestral things that we bring up through our lineage. And so much of that we think that we don't have any control of. It's just the way my mom was. Oh, my mom and my grandmother and her mom, they were all depressed women. And what I love about this is that with awareness, what you're saying and what science is proving is that we can be that person in our lineage that says, no more. It stops here with me.
And the very fact that someone is listening to this right now means you're the one, because
Right?
you're the one that has this message, that can understand and hear this message. Our mothers and our grandmothers and all, they didn't have this opportunity. Right. And as people say, I don't have a way of proving this, but they do say that when we heal ourselves, we heal 7 generations behind us and 7 generations in front of us. Now that's good motivation, right? You're not doing it for yourself, do it for others. Yes. To heal this lineage. And now is such a huge time on the planet for healing the old traumas. I mean, my God, the amazing work of Mate and so many people on this area of trauma. I think we are in an incredible renaissance from inner transformation.
Yes, we have so many resources available to us that just weren't available even 20 or 30 years ago. The way that trauma is even talked about now, where before you just kept all that stuff to yourself. It's so powerful. And there's a lot of attention right now being given to the loneliness that successful women feel at the top of the ladder, whether it's the corporate ladder, it's the top of success. And I'm wondering, have you experienced this yourself and how you've approached that given all of the inner resources that you have?
So I think we each have our own flavors of the way our trauma or pain manifests. Loneliness has never actually been one of mine. I've always felt a great sisterhood of other women, and that's been awesome. I've certainly felt judgments from men and things like that, but my response to that has not been loneliness. However, my particular stuff has been around feeling inferior, not feeling good enough. So it's always been this effort to prove myself so that I would feel worthy. Okay, great. I'm going to get to the top, and then I will have proven myself that I'm really worthy, but it doesn't work that way. You still have to work on the inner stuff. So for me, it manifests a little more in the area of competition, feeling competitive, especially with other women. And so I realized that's where the wounding is in me. And those are my lessons. I think life is a school, and we're just taking different curriculum. And so some people are taking the loneliness curriculum. Some people are taking the competitive curriculum or the insecurity curriculum or whatever. So it's like embrace whatever curriculum it is that's yours. And so for those that might feel more lonely at the top, my suggestion is go find some amazing women who truly feel like soul sisters to you. And they don't have to be in the same positions you're in, but that's how we don't feel lonely. We feel our connectedness with other people. And I feel very, very blessed in that way to have some amazing soul sisters that I have really gotten to be on life journey with.
Yeah, I love that. And I love finding other women of that same peer group, of that same, for lack of a better word, level to have some coherence with, essentially, right? And this is a topic that I've been asked to speak about a lot or write articles about. And one of the things that I have talked about is that we are the cure for what ails us. And the patriarchal views and the feminist kind of fight against this and the glass ceiling and all of that, I think it's a noble quest. And yet we have so much untapped power and potential within ourselves that we are the cure for what ails us. And it's an inside job. And so this is one of the areas that I know you really talk about. And I want to bring this together a little bit because so many of the women that I work with or that are listening to this podcast are women who they have been at the top. They have experienced whether it's loneliness or it's feeling unsupported or what you've mentioned. There's a sacrifice that women experience at the top there. And shifting that paradigm is something that we can do from a more expansive, conscious, enlightened path. That's my thought on it. So I'm wondering if, like, you talk about like the miracle zone and you have your program, the Year of Miracles. And I know it's not exactly tailored to exactly what we're talking about here, but when we're talking about being in a space of creating something different for ourselves from a place that we, like they say, you can't solve a problem with the same mind that created it, right?
Right.
So I'm wondering if you can talk about how so many women at the top have learned how to be successful in one way or the other. Like they might be really great manifestors, even if that's not what they call it, but they know how to channel a lot of their gifts. And you talk about the 5 areas of the miracle zone. So in your perspective, could you talk about those? And could you tell us about the women at the top? What could they focus on more to really be able to create more miracles for themselves?
I would be delighted to talk about what I call as the 5 foundations to living in the miracle zone. But first, I just want to make a comment to finish the loop on the loneliness feeling at the top. I have been in women's support groups, 5, 6 women since 1987. Wow. So that's a long time. And those have been so phenomenal for me. And I would highly recommend that as something that any woman who's feeling lonely, that she create a mastermind group, a support group. I now call them a miracles group, and you can many different formats to deal with. And then also to look at, okay, if I'm feeling lonely out there, where am I showing up for myself? Am I abandoning myself? Am I not there for myself? But let's talk about what you asked, which is the 5 foundations for living in the miracle zone. Let me first tell you what I mean by a miracle. The definition of a miracle, according to the dictionary, is a surprise and welcome event that can't be explained by science, but that's often attributed to divine grace. So those things that happen, you go, wow, how on earth did that happen? It could be something tiny. Somebody calls you when you're just thinking about them, or you get an answer. You're thinking about a question and an email comes in exactly with that answer. I needed this exact amount of money to pay a bill and I got it out of nowhere. It's just a surprise and welcome event. But we can't create miracles. The dictionary definition says they can't be attributed to science and they're often attributed to divine grace. What we can do is we can create the conditions in our lives for flow, for miracles, for the good stuff to flow in. And that's what I'm talking about. How do I create the ground, the place in my life where it's just, I walk out the door and I go, wow, I don't know what's going to happen today, but I know it's going to be great. And then it is. How do you do that? So there are many principles, but I found 5 are the most important. And I created an acronym for it. It's called USHER. Just go through it briefly, and then we can touch on any of them that you might want me to talk about more. The U in Usher stands for universe. And the principle is to trust in the universe. One of the things that I found was distinctly different about happy people than everybody else is that they believe that this is a loving universe and that whatever happens for them, not to them or against them. Einstein said that the most important question we can ask ourselves is this a benevolent universe? And how you answer that question will determine your outlook in life. So what I suggest with this one about trusting in the universe, that's a little esoteric. Of course, you can meditate and do all those things, which is great. But also, if something's happening to you that you think is bad, instead of feeling like a victim of it, turn it around and ask yourself this question. If this is a loving verse and everything's happening for me, what's the lesson or gift in this? And it just shifts your energy to going, okay, there's something in this for me. So that's the first U. The S in Usher, it stands for soul. And it's about listening to the soul. Most of us are listening in our lives to our egos. What should I be doing? And egos are coming from fear. They're coming from fear and lack, and I'm not good enough. So our ego's trying to prove ourselves. The soul is who we really are. The soul is our essence. And the more we tune in and listen to the soul and act from the soul, the more our life flows. Then the H is heart, stands for heart, and it's about leading life with an open heart. I have never seen a happy person who didn't have an open heart. And what I mean by that is forgiveness, loving kindness, compassion, generosity, those kinds of things, open-heartedness. And what I want as I go through these, by the way, is for everybody to identify where you're the weakest right now, because that's where you want to focus your attention in the next week or two. Okay, then the E stands for energy. And it's about choosing where you put your energy and attention, choosing your thoughts, choosing your life force, choosing where your life force goes. Am I going to pay attention to what's not working in my life right now? Or am I going to be in gratitude for what is working? And then finally, the R stands for responsibility. And it's about taking responsibility for our lives, not showing up as a victim in life. And victims, you're being a victim when you're blaming, shaming, or complaining. Instead, showing up as a victor in life, which says, I have the ability to choose how to respond in my life to what's happening. So those are the 5. And Erin, I'm going to put you on the spot and ask you, where do you feel like you're the weakest? So you've got trusting in the universe. You've got listening to the soul, leading with an open heart, choosing where you put your energy and attention, and taking responsibility for your life. Where do you most need some support right now for yourself?
Well, I'm really good at trusting the universe and leading from my soul, managing my energy. And I definitely know how my life got this way. I know the responsibility that I have. However, I think that I do not always lead with an open heart. I think that trust can be an issue for me. And I definitely see where that comes from with childhood traumas and things like that. And it's a practice that I always have to come back to. I do heart math. I do the things to just like open back up, because I oftentimes, especially when I get into fear or there's a place where I have to trust something else or someone outside of myself or my own inner wisdom, then I will contract. Yeah. And so I think that the heart portion of the miracle zone. And what's interesting is that when I'm contracted in my heart, where do I end up? I tell this to my own patients, like, this is the bad neighborhood. In between your ears is a bad neighborhood. Don't hang out there.
I love that you brought up heart math. I'm a huge fan of the heart coherence techniques. And just even right now, if everybody who's listening, if you just put one hand over your heart and just focus your energy right now in that area around your heart, and even with your eyes open, you can just imagine that you're inhaling into your heart and exhaling out of your heart, and that you're breathing in love and compassion. Just even 30 seconds or a minute of doing that. I do it when I'm standing in line at the grocery store, or I do it when I'm on the phone with somebody. Nobody has to know that you're ever doing it. Just that shifts you energetically back to the heart, where you said it, the mind is so used to spinning out, and we spend so much energy and attention in the mind. And it's about moving it back to the heart. And it's practical, simple things. It's not necessarily huge things. I mean, of course, there's great forgiveness practices and things. So thank you for being vulnerable in sharing that. And I just invite everyone to go, which of those right now is calling my attention? And then just attention for the next week. Trust in the universe, or from the soul. You know, if you're a person that has a hard time listening to your intuition, you need to focus a little more on living from your soul, or whatever it is. Just look at where you could boost yourself right now.
This is so beautiful because it's an easy acronym to remember.
Yes.
And universe, soul, heart, energy, responsibility. Those are key words. And they're wonderful portals, literally, into an infinite place for every one of those. Like, so much more deeper work is available. There's so much more deeper meaning. We can take things superficially depending on where we're at. And superficial doesn't mean bad. I'm not meaning that in a bad way, but we work down to the core of things, like we were peeling an onion, right? And there's so much there. There's a whole new life there. And it's so beautiful. So we're kind of doing it right now, but I'd love to give a little bit more airtime to the importance of spirituality, because I found that it's an often neglected part of life for so many women at the top of the success ladder, which is also why I think there's so much loneliness and unhappiness to be found there, because it's pretty much the essence of who we are. And yet we're not giving the time that I don't know if time is the right word, the attention, the energy there. And what's interesting is I've been working with women for 19 years, almost 20 years. And I still find when I'm working with a new client that in my head, I'm still kind of like trying to figure out what's the best way to talk to somebody that I don't know really well yet about the spiritual self or God or source or the universe or whatever it is. And the soul with someone who might not be all that well acquainted with it, but they're feeling some sort of pull towards what they might say is, I want to know myself better, or I want to ground, or they have all these different ways of talking about this. Mm-hmm. But essentially, it's a pull towards the core of who we are.
Well, assuming the person is open and interested, which is
absolutely,
because we can't do anything with people that aren't open or interested, but assuming that they are, I like to meet people where they are. Mm-hmm. So if they're talking about it in terms of, I want to feel more grounded, I talk about it in terms of, there's an energy of Mother Earth. That's the groundedness. I might talk about the lower chakras. I might explain the chakra system, and then just speak to how the body and the mind and the heart are expressions of the soul. They're not the soul, and who we are as a soul. And whatever language someone's comfortable with when I talk about soul, they're comfortable with the divine or God or creative intelligence or nature. I don't care. It doesn't matter to me. What matters is, I think it's important for all of us to connect in with that which is the truth of who we are. Mm-hmm. We are the soul. We're not this hair and this language and this. We're not that. We're the soul. Mm-hmm. And I think from what I've seen, the truly most fulfilled and awakened people that I've seen in life are those who know that, who experience that, mm-hmm. who are more identified with themselves as a soul, mm-hmm. rather than the personality. Not that they're ignoring the personality, because then you go into what we call spiritual bypass. We are here in a body with emotions for a reason. Mm-hmm. And I believe the reason is to integrate truly the fullness of the soul, the beingness, into this mind-body instrument that we each have been given.
Absolutely. Myself, when I went through a very difficult time after I had my first daughter, after 18 years of not being able to have a child.
Wow.
That's an amazing story in and of itself. But I got severe postpartum depression, and healing from that was an arduous, long process. And I remember the day I was sitting on a chair next to a pool in Bali, and it just dropped into me, this voice that said, I have nothing better to do in my life than to know myself. And that was a turning point for me of going from this driven success or achievement. For me, it was more achievement. How many more degrees can a person get? Like you said that you went to sugar as a child. For me, I went to achievement. Yeah. Academics were my thing. And I always knew that I could get approval by achieving something. And so that day in Bali, when I heard that, and I've shared that with so many people, because once I feel like we really understand that there's no nobler thing we can do with our time here in this earth than to really get to know ourselves. And by that, I mean the capital S self. It's our highest self. It's the God self. And that's what you're doing.
I agree with you 100%. And this is where I think it's really important that we actually, where I said, choose where you put your energy and attention. We need time and attention for ourselves. You can't get to what you're talking about right now by going 24/7. And I will tell you a quick story. Years ago, I was teaching self-esteem seminars. Before I started teaching about self-love, I was teaching about self-esteem. And a dear friend of mine, girlfriend, came to me and said, Marci, you look terrible. She didn't actually use that word. She used worse words than that. She said, you're working really hard. You're completely burned out and you're hitting your head against a wall. And I'm going to take you away with me on a silent 7-day meditation retreat. And I looked at her and I said, you're crazy. I haven't been silent for more than 2 hours in my life. But she was very convincing, and off we went. And on the 4th day, in the middle of a meditation, this light bulb went off in my head. And I saw the words, chicken soup for the woman's soul. I knew it was like this gift from the divine. It was like, oh my God, that's what I'm supposed to do. It was total inspiration. I only had one problem. I still had 3 more days of silence and I couldn't tell my great epiphany, but I did afterwards, ran to the closest payphone. It was before cell phones. And I called Jack Canfield, who was my mentor. And I said, oh my God, chicken soup for the woman's soul. And he said, that's such a brilliant idea. And he called the publisher. A few months later, off I was working on Chicken Soup for the Woman's Soul. It came from silence, from going inward. Everything that's been birthed has come from my thinking mind. It has come from me being in some kind of inward direction. So what I say, not everybody has the ability to go away on a 7-day silent meditation retreat. Never done that since. I've done 4 days. That's when I came up with Happy for No Reason, was on a 4-day silent retreat. But we all have the ability to take a half a day and to do an electronics fast and to just give ourselves a half a day in nature, in silence, doing our own little mini soul retreat. And doing that on a regular basis is critical. I don't care how busy you are. We can find a way to do that.
Absolutely. I always say, if you're looking for evolution, you have to do the involution first, because involution always precedes evolution. And that is, I think that's just the law of the universe. Like creation, you got to go inside first. It's an inside job.
First. Beautiful. And actually, when you get more used to going inside, it becomes a friendlier place to go, because along with it, you need big doses of self-love and self-compassion.
I mean, now that you do it regularly, it's almost like a thirst. It's like, no, I can't talk to you right now. I'm going to meditate. It's a need. It's a driving need. It can become that.
It is. And it's nourishment. It's either I'm running on empty or I'm actually nourishing myself. I love being really practical. I want to give everybody another little tip of something that I do regularly. And that is, we talk about lack of self-love, which I think is probably the number one disease. And when we love something, we take care of it and we listen to it and we nurture and nourish it. So I want you to write down, if you have a little Post-it or anywhere, write down on a piece of paper this question, simple question. What's the most loving thing I could do for myself right now? Super easy. What's the most loving thing I could do for myself right now? And then a couple of times during the day, just take a moment, ask that question, and then go do whatever the answer is. The answer could be, I'm going to drink a little bit of water. The answer is, I'm going to call a friend. I'm going to go out and get some fresh air. It doesn't need to be long. It's about tuning in and hearing, what do I need right? What's a loving thing I could do for myself right now? And especially for those people who are very, very caretaking your parents, caretaking your children, caretaking your business, caretaking your employees. We tend to be very caretaking. We need to replenish caretaking of ourselves.
I love that. And that's so true. And there's two concepts here that we're talking about: love, self-love.
Yes.
And then what I actually hear you talking to is that vitality as well. And I want to talk about both of them. So let's see. I'm sure we can bring these together.
Sure.
But I've heard you talk about vitality before, and it's so beautiful when you talk about it. But you've talked about it as prana and life force. And there's something about when we hear the word, that's what prana means, is life force, right? That's the Sanskrit. But for me, when I hear that, it's like, it gets me right in the chest. And it's more than just us. Vitality becomes this kind of cliche word that's like spas and that type of self-care. But vitality is also one of the core principles of the Lavish framework, that I developed and I use with my clients. That's one of the principles of the V in Lavish. And I talk about it as the ability to recycle all that we've experienced and achieved and accomplished into the new or ongoing iteration of ourselves, and understanding that it all has value. So can you describe, in the beautiful way that you do, vitality, what it is not, and the profound importance of it?
Yes, I would be delighted to. In order to do this, I have to get vitality into my computer right now.
Okay, no problem.
Plug in the computer. So vitality to me means aliveness. And interestingly, that my computer was needing some vitality. It was needing juice. I think that vitality comes from being plugged in to the greater spirit of life, whatever we call that, but plugged into the universal juice, where it's not our own individual energy that we're only tapping into, but we're tapping into this unlimited, vast source. And when it shows up, it's, it in people. You're around them and they're alive, and it's contagious, and you want to be around them and they're radiant. My father was actually one of those people. And what about vitality? What happens is you love wherever you are, whatever it is you're doing. My father was a dentist, and when he retired at age 72, most people lose their zest for life when they retire because they lose their meaning. My dad said, "Oh, that's not going to happen to me." And he analyzed what he loved about being a dentist, and he loved working with his hands in intricate ways and being artistic. And he took up needlepoint. He became a master needlepointer and won awards throughout all of California.
Wow.
And he just had this vitality, this zest for life, for whatever was in front of him. And it wasn't just when he was needlepointing, it was whatever it was. He was curious and interested. And I think that happens when we feel plugged in. And the way it relates to love, because you wanted to bring love into the equation, is everything.
Right.
Being connected at greater energy of the universe is this flow, this avalanche of love. Love is the energy of the universe. And you're tapped into that, not as romantic love. That's not what we're talking about. The very just delicious yumminess of life, being in love with life, being in love with yourself, being in love, which it starts there, being in love with that greater energy that you are plugged into. I mean, those people that I know that have this vitality are those that are plugged into love.
Oh, this is such like nourishment for the soul. I just love all of this stuff, even though it's not new to me, but I know it will be new to so many people. And it may be jaw-dropping. This is life-changing wisdom here. And what I hear you saying, we've all been around some of those people who, I imagine, Marci, that you are one of these people, that when they walk into a room, everybody notices because they have that presence. And the presence comes from being tapped in. It's almost this mystic quality that comes from a knowing of life beyond what we can see with our physical eyes. And that kind of presence is like when we can cultivate that as powerful women, this is what embodiment of our true selves looks like. I just love how you brought that all together. It just is like, it's like smelling a beautiful flower. It's so wonderful.
It's great to be in this conversation with you because, I feel like we're speaking the same language, and it's just so delightful to be in this conversation. To me, this conversation actually activates the experience of greater love or greater vitality, or there's a transmission in just having this conversation. And I can feel it with you now. And I know that we're probably getting low on time, but I wanted to, can I make one comment about something that I have to say I hear more than anything, especially from women? And that is, isn't this selfish? To want to take care of yourself, to want to be happier, to want to focus on all of this. What about the rest of the world?
Just to have a desire.
Yeah, exactly. It's selfish. And so what I have to say is this. I believe the least selfish thing that we can do is to become the most alive and happy and vital and love-filled and plugged in our lives, because we impact the people all around us all the time. The happiness research shows that our impact goes at least 5 people out to people you don't even know. So your happiness is affecting your neighbors, cousins, sons, school teacher. We are, and many people spread out farther than that even. So there's a beautiful Chinese proverb that I always love to share with people. And it goes like this. It says, when there is light in the soul, there will be beauty in the person. When there is beauty in the person, there will be harmony in the house. When there is harmony in the house, there will be order in the nation. And when there is order in the nation, there will be peace in the world. And my prayer and my wish for every single one of us is that we know that light in our soul, that we live that. And through that, we help create more peace here on this planet of ours.
Yes, absolutely. I'm just getting this, like, if we can shift the way that we're viewing the self and taking time for ourselves and developing ourselves and going inwards for ourselves from a selfish aspect to realizing that it is the most generous, philanthropic thing we can do for the world, we might actually make a shift in all of our education and our success and our accomplishments and our achievements and our power and our attaining. We're the ones that should be making the ripple effect. We're the ripple effect. Then, therefore, absolutely not selfish. It's actually very selfish to keep that all to yourself and not allow yourself to be that generous, giving ripple or the stone that causes the ripple, right? So we have to shift that and realize, wow, me doing this, me taking the time, me going on a silent retreat, me unplugging and saying no to whatever so that I can work on myself is the most amazing, generous thing I can do for the world right now.
Truly. I say yes to that. And now is the time. This is alive on the planet. It's not an accident that people are listening to our conversation right now. To me, if you're listening to this, it's because there's something for you to hear. And you're like, we're in this together. It's a collective. And I can feel the collective energy that's building amongst women and women in this conversation. So I think it's a very exciting time. And I think we're really here to support each other, all of us, in awakening to the truth of who we are.
Yes, absolutely. I call it enlightened feminism. It's really time. Yeah. I'm just like, raise the roof here. It's so hard to, like, I want to smiling. This is like, I've got the like beauty queen smile on where you're smiling so much it hurts. So I have 2 more questions for you as we finish up here, just to go along with this, talking about love. And I know unconditional, you are an expert on unconditional love, and unconditional love of self with the capital S is the first principle of a lavish life in my framework. And it's the first principle. And yet it weaves into every other aspect of our life, right? So when we talk about the other principles of abundance and authenticity and vitality and voice, intuition and integrity, spirituality, self-expression, and health and healing, which are the other principles of this lavish life, love of self has to be there for any of those to really have any meaning. But we all know that this is one of the hardest aspects of life, as you have already mentioned, especially for those of us that are high achievers and perfectionists. What have been the most difficult aspects of this for you in your life? And what have you learned along the way that allows you to return to a place where you're falling in love with yourself again?
I think, like everybody, it's the challenges are in the way that we have been trained to talk to ourselves, the way we've been trained to treat ourselves. And it's really about developing a much more compassionate, loving way to hold the wounded pieces. And, there's so many modalities to work with for greater self-love. And I love them all. Breathing, breath techniques, and tapping, and a million different modalities, but it all gets to the same thing. There's the great quote by Rumi that says something like, the paraphrase is that our essence is love, and our only real task is to dissolve the barriers that are preventing us from our experience of ourselves as love. So that to me is where our work is just we are love. We don't have to build ourselves more as love. That's who we are. Our job is to dissolve the barriers between us and that experience.
Right. So that the authentic self comes through. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. This has been such a wonderful conversation. My heart is full. I have one last question for you. You've accomplished so much. You've done so much for so many women over the entire globe. Where do you see that you still have untapped potential?
Oh, I think we're never done. So it's just an ongoing process of awakening more and more to the truth of who I am and to the vastness of life and the universe. So it's just this ongoing process of awakening to love.
Yes.
To divinity.
Showing up for the party.
Yeah. The life party.
The life party. That's right.
Life party.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Marci, for being here with me today and for sharing your wisdom and your expertise and just your light. It's been such an honor. Would you please tell us where we can find you? You have a new podcast out as well. So tell us all about that.
I do. I teach a program called Your Year of Miracles. This is my 10th year teaching this. We have this year over 5,000, mostly women from 87 countries, about how to live in the miracle zone and how to live a miraculous life. And I'm blown away by people's experiences. So people can find me at youryearofmiracles.com if you're interested in that. I have a new podcast called Living in the Miracle Zone, and it's about how do we move into living in the miracle zone. And then there's also my work on happiness at happyfornoreason.com, happyfornoreason.com.
So many avenues to your light and your wisdom. Thank you so much for sharing it with us here today. This has been a truly lavish conversation, and I mean that. Such a wonderful conversation. Thank you again, Marci.
Oh, I've enjoyed it so much, Erin. I just want to thank you for instigating the conversation. It was great fun.
You're welcome. The Lavish Leader, Unveiling Wisdom is brought to you by Dr. Erin Martin and the Lavish Group. To find out more about Dr. Erin and how you can create and embody a lavish life for yourself, visit thelavishgroup.com. And don't forget to search for Lavish Leader in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts, or anywhere else podcasts are found. And click subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. On behalf of the team here at the Lavish Group, thanks for listening. And remember, you too can live a lavish life of fulfillment, beauty, and love.